Hey folks, Jack Spirko here with another episode of Miyagi Mornings coming to you on a chilly Tuesday morning. And today we're going to talk about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general. We're going to zero in on something about Bitcoin. If you saw the title of this video is Why is Bitcoin Valuable? I've heard a lot of people give explanations of this, but generally they come down on one side or the other of what I'm going to give you today. But I'm here to tell you it's both sides. So let's start out with the side that a lot of people tend to use, and it's basically, they're talking about Bitcoin, but it's really, why is cryptocurrency valuable? Why is there any value in any? I mean, even if cryptocurrency is worth 50 cents, the fact that you have something that's been created by computers, by a private system, not backed by the government, how is that possible? Can't you just Control-C, Control-V your way to being a millionaire, even if it's worth 50 cents? You know, once you get 10, copy all those. Once you get 100, copy all those, and just boom, boom, boom. No, you can't. And that's a big part of why cryptocurrency is valuable. So what cryptocurrency does as a whole, and I'm not going to go into the difference between proof of work, proof of stake, delayed proof of work, all that stuff today. Just understand that they use mechanisms involving mathematics that allow for a token or a coin or a piece of a coin to have a number. And that number can't be duplicated, it can't be copied, you can't spend it somewhere else. In other words, it cannot be counterfeited, right? You cannot counterfeit a cryptocurrency, which would be what we call, in the crypto space, they call that double spend. There's been places where it's been pulled off, but it's been pulled off in the realm of, you know, hacking exchange using non-custodial wallets and things like that, or some other highly technical stuff we're not getting into today. But in general, it's incredibly secure. And it allows me, if Dana, my cat here behind me in the video, if she is a friend of mine in Istanbul, Turkey, or Sydney, Australia, or Timbuktu, or anywhere in the world, as long as Dana, who would have to be a person to do this, has a wallet address, I can send her money, and the government can't do diddly squat shit about it. And she knows, and I know, come on, cat, don't, now she's rubbing on the tripod, creating vibrations. Anyway, she knows and I know that it's legitimately real money. That, like, if she goes to exchange it or spend it, that it will be accepted for whatever it's trading at currently. And if you think about this, this is a huge reason that all the rich guys have offshore bank accounts. It's so they can move money around without the government sticking their fingers in it. It's not because they make so much more interest in the Bahamas. These type of rich people can make way more interest than a Bahamas bank account pays them. It's to keep their money out of the reach of government should something go wrong in the United States and the government comes after them. Bitcoin enables that. Bitcoin allows people that don't have a bank account to transact as if they had a bank account and circumvent the banking system. For all these reasons, but what it really comes down to is two people can do business in a trustless manner. I don't have to trust you to take Bitcoin from you. I know that once I have the verified transaction, I'm good. And people will keep going on with this about explaining why Bitcoin is valuable. And if we go back when it was like Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum was all that existed, it's a pretty valid explanation. It didn't cease to be valid, but it doesn't explain why Litecoin's at like 130, 140 bucks and Bitcoin's at like $31,000 this morning or something like that. It doesn't explain that differential. It doesn't explain why Bitcoin's so much more valuable. If it was only everything I just explained to you, guess what? Litecoin does that better and costs less to use. Litecoin's faster, it costs less to use. Now, the other thing that makes Bitcoin valuable, and this is something that's back in this kind of, I guess you'd call it side one of the argument, is it's finite in its numbers. There can only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. And by the way, that number really is more like 16 million because we know that millions of Bitcoin were lost forever when the whole thing started up and people mined it and lost laptops and things like that, and there's no way to recover it. There's also tremendous amounts of stranded Bitcoin, little tiny pieces of Bitcoin that are so small you can't afford to move them. So there's a lot less Bitcoin than the 21 million. Plus it hasn't all been minted yet. And every 3 years, the amount being created gets cut in half. It's a deflationary currency. So you could say, well, the reason Bitcoin's worth so much more than Litecoin is because there's 21 million Litecoin or 21 million Bitcoin or something like 83 or 75 million, somewhere in that number, significantly more Litecoin in the total market cap. Okay, fine, but there's other cryptocurrencies that have the same number of units, they're straight force of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's worth more than them. So what makes Bitcoin king of the hill? Number one reason, first mover advantage. When there was no cryptocurrency, and then there was cryptocurrency the next day, the cryptocurrency that was there the next day was Bitcoin. First mover advantage in any sector, especially a disruptive sector. Something that completely changes the world. The one that gets there first, as long as it's capitalized on. I'm looking at you, Kodak, who had the digital camera in the 1970s and went bankrupt in the 1990s. All right? So as long as it's capitalized on and made mainstream, is tremendously hard to knock off. Some of you guys are old like me. You remember the days where we had beta and VCR, right? VHS tapes. VHS tapes simply got the market share first. Beta was a better technology. Then DVDs came along, and then fully digital entertainment came along, right? Same thing happened with you had record albums and 8-tracks didn't really capitalize, so when the cassette came out, it became king of the hill all the way up to the DVD, but it took a complete earth-shattering shift to topple each one of those from that first mover advantage. There's been no earth-shattering shifts in cryptocurrency since Bitcoin. There's been some real innovations and things that do things way better than Bitcoin will ever hope to do, but in the end, they're still running the same fundamental underlying technology. You might call it proof of stake versus proof of work, but in essence, it is the same as the same as the same. It's a digital currency. And until you come up with a completely new way to do this, Bitcoin will maintain that first mover advantage unless the people that work on the technology itself lay back to the point where somebody truly supplants them in the minds and the confidence of the people using it. Doesn't matter if it works better. Beta was better than VHS. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. By the time you got to a point where people were even thinking about it, here's a DVD. All right. So until people change their mind about that, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be anytime soon. Next is Bitcoin has been referred to so many times, and some people really love this terminology and some people really hate it, as digital gold. The people that hate it, I don't think they know what the informed people that use the terminology really mean. I use that terminology. I use it less and less now because there's so much confusion about what I mean. And I figure once people understand what I'm talking about, I'll just change my language. So I call being an anarchist more like being an agorist or a voluntarist. It means the same thing, but you understand it better what I'm talking about. So when we say digital gold, what we mean is it's the crypto reserve currency, and that's the term I've taken to using more often. It's crypto reserve currency. And why is it the crypto reserve currency? Because whenever you want to funge another cryptocurrency and change it into something else, and you go to an exchange, even many of the decentralized exchanges, there is always a Bitcoin market, a Bitcoin board that it trades on. So if you have ARK and you decide I want R, and you send your ARK to a cryptocurrency exchange that also has R, you're not going to see turn ARK into R. You're going to have to turn ARK into one of three that act as a reserve. There'll be a dollar coin, usually Tether USDT, Ethereum, and Bitcoin. And then R may trade on all three of those boards, or one of those boards, or two of those boards, but if it trades at all, it will trade on the Bitcoin board. Meaning there is a constant need for a supply of Bitcoin to funge all these currencies into other currencies. And it's almost universally the case that if you have an exchange where you want to sell your crypto into fiat currency, dollars, yen, whatever, so that you can put it in your bank account and spend it in the world that doesn't take cryptocurrency yet, the only thing you can do that with is Bitcoin. So one of the reasons you might have seen a big premium come out of Coinbase during this last big Bitcoin run-up that ran up over 35,000 is there were people that just wanted cash. And they didn't care if they had to pay a couple $100 a unit more because they wanted the cash now. They wanted to get out and go into cash for whatever reason. They didn't feel comfortable with the US dollar. Or maybe they even did and they needed to go there to get into the dollar coin. But if you look around, yes, you'll find exchanges that use Tether or another dollar coin or Ethereum as a reserve. But almost all of them include Bitcoin in that list. So that creates this constant need. Now, when you take that and you couple it with the first side of the argument about digital scarcity, only 21 million Bitcoins ever. what you really need to understand is because it has the first mover advantage and the reserve status, which is because of the first mover advantage, it is the one that people most want to own. People have the most confidence that it will be. It's been here 11 years, it'll probably be here 11 more. This other thing I don't really understand yet, I'm not so sure. So the average investor coming to cryptocurrency and saying, you know, I'd like to put a little bit of my money in this, that's the first place they go. And it's the first place most of the time they have to go. You come to the biggest exchange there is for the average consumer, Coinbase. You do all your KYC, bank account, and all that shit. The first thing you buy is Bitcoin. They make you. You can't come in and buy Litecoin for cash. You have to buy Bitcoin and then buy other things with Bitcoin. So since people buy it first, they tend to want to keep some of it. So what happens, because now there's ETFs that, invest in Bitcoin and things like that. And the mainstream, the powers that be, the corporate apparatus and the government, the state, have decided not to kill this thing, but to attempt to make as much as they can off of it. So it's only a matter of time before it becomes really easy and really well known that if you have an IRA or something like that, you can buy Bitcoin. Maybe not directly, maybe not the way that we would tell you to buy Bitcoin, but you can use the money that's sitting in your IRA and throw a little bit in some Bitcoin. Same way you would buy a silver ETF in an IRA. Okay. So what happens when, I don't know, everybody with an IRA in the United States with more than $400,000 in it, that's a pretty small segment of the total, decides they want, hey, it's 30 grand for a Bitcoin, or 20 grand if it goes back down, or 50 grand if it goes up, whatever. I'd like to have a quarter of a Bitcoin in my IRA. Can't be done. There's not enough. There are huge reserves being held by entities that are not giving it up. There's tons of it split up amongst small holders that are not giving it up. And there's only so much new Bitcoin every year. That's just the United States. Look at the rest of the developed world and look at the parts of the world that have embraced this way more than we have, like South Korea and Japan and even China. And when you start getting massive competition for the scarce amount of Bitcoin that's left, and it is true scarcity, it's not an artificial scarcity. You can't make more of it. You can make another currency, but you can't make another Bitcoin that is the original Bitcoin. It's like the original Coke. You can change the formula and people dump it out in the street. It will not, nobody's cracked it yet to where somebody will say this is the new king of the hill. And as long as that's the case, when you hear people making predictions like someday Bitcoin's going to be worth $200,000 or $500,000, I'm not saying they're right. I'm saying they have good reason to speculate on that because it would happen tomorrow. If 5% of the people in America that have IRAs with more than $200,000 in it decided they wanted $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, which is only 5% of their holdings, so 5% of people want 5% of their holdings in Bitcoin, it's done. The math says so. And so when you hear somebody give you the second explanation I gave you, they're giving you half the story. When you hear them give you the first explanation I give you, they're giving you half the story. Until those two things come together, you can't explain $30,000 Bitcoin. When they come together, you're not even surprised by it. I'll put it to you this way as I finish up today. Went a little long because this is a hard subject to understand. Okay? If I understood cryptocurrency in 2012 the way I do today, I would be a billionaire. And I want to be clear what I mean by that. Because anybody that could go back to like 2012 and knew Bitcoin would be worth $30,000 would just buy a shitload of it. I wouldn't have to know the price. Everything I would have needed to know in 2012 had I looked and sought to understand before I blocked it with my mind like so many people do with crypto, because I did too at the beginning. It didn't make sense. Had I opened my mind back then and understood back then, just the knowledge that I gave you today would have been enough that I probably would have put about $20,000 into Bitcoin when it was under $1. And when it started going up, I would have kept throwing more money into it. Do what you want with that, but if you really ever wondered why the hell is this one cryptocurrency such a titan and worth so much more than everything else, that's the best explanation I can give you. We'll catch you tomorrow.